Looking at Nigeria's stock markets, despite another disappointing inflation report, Nigerian stocks soared, adding 2.1 trillion naira, that's about $4.9 billion last week. Investors piled into telecoms and consumer goods giants like Airtel Africa and PZ Cousins, pushing the year-to-date return to a staggering 41.39%. This bullish sentiment suggests investors are looking beyond short-term economic challenges, betting on long-term growth potential. So at this time, let's quickly take a look at the numbers. We start by looking at the broad index from the last trading. Of course, all share index. We see 105,722.78, and that's about 3.79% gain in there. Let's quickly look at our market capitalization. Also, we saw a cap of 57.85 trillion. That's almost like what we witnessed last week, Friday, with about 3.79% appreciation also. And I'll take a look at the top price gainers for the week. We see Julie PLC topping the chart with 1 naira 47 kobo. That's about 45.54% gain. Geregu Power seeing about 901 naira in gains, and BUA Foods 357.50 kobo, and of course Royal Exchange and Dow Communication seeing about a minimal 84 kobo, 81 kobo in terms of appreciation. We look at the top losers for the week. Now, Maya PLC tops the charts, about 18.96% in losses was being recorded. Morrison Industries saw about the same 18.69% in loss. Deep Capital, Flour Mills, Unilever, Nigeria Limited also seeing some sort of losses in their markets, looking at 14.29% in loss, and of course Unilever 10.81% according to what we have. A quick look at the sectoral performance for the week. Now, we see a strong claim coming from the banking industry, but then it was about a loss anyway, a strong loss, I must say, I beg your pardon, about 1.34. Insurance saw a 2.66% in gain in terms of appreciation and performance. Oil and gas 5.25. Consumer goods, industrial goods also, we saw a bit of appreciation in terms of the performance. That's 10.96 for the consumer goods. And well, for the industrial goods, it was a loss of about 1.83. So that's how it went down for the outgone week. When we go on a break and return, we'll look at Nigeria's legal tender and, of course, what it means for personal and business travel allowances. Do stay with us. According to reports, the Central Bank of Nigeria last week announced that cash payment for personal and business travel allowances would no longer be allowed. The directive was conveyed in a circular address to all authorized banks signed by Hassan Mahmud, the director of its Trade and Exchange Department. Now, to promote transparency and accountability in the Forex market, the Apex Bank directed all banks to process the allowances through electronic channels. At this point, Dr. Josh Bamfo, partner and head of the transfer pricing services practice Andersen in Nigeria, joins us to shed more light on it. Dr. Bamfo, it's nice to have you around.
Thanks for having me.
So what are the implications of the Central Bank of Nigeria's decision to no longer allow cash payments for personal and business travel allowances?
I think before we can even talk about the implications, we need to try to understand why the central bank is issuing such directives. That then puts it in proper context what the implications would be. It's obvious that the Central Bank of Nigeria is moving from the previous regime where there was some significant intervention of the government in terms of setting the exchange rate, or fixing it within some particular bound. In the official market and allowing the power market to, kind of float a little bit. But this current administration has moved significantly away from that particular regime to a more flexible regime or a free-floating regime. And what that means is that their major goal is to bring efficiency in that particular market, which is the foreign exchange market. Part of the efficiency is to also ensure that there's transparency in terms of transactions that occur within that particular market. So specific to this particular directive, one of the major source of demand for Forex is when individuals travel or businesses, people in the business arena travel. And usually they get these travel allowances from their banks. And the banks issues those travel allowance in cash, which is, whether it's USD or euros or what have you. However, for the central bank to be able to track the amount of, Forex that goes to, individuals or businesses for their travel allowances, they are moving away from cash payments to, electronic transactions, such as, crediting your debit card with that particular amount, so that when you travel, you'll be making payments with your debit card as opposed to making payments with, cash. So I think in terms of implication, if you look at it from the CBN's perspective, that transparency and ability to track those transactions between the commercial banks and their customers for that particular purpose, which is the travel allowance, is very important in terms of gathering data and having a sense of what is actually going to a particular source of demand for Forex. So that transparency and accountability will actually help Central Bank of Nigeria achieve the efficiency that they want to achieve within that within the Forex market. From the perspective of individuals and businesses, in my view, as long as they are going to destinations or jurisdictions where acceptance of credit cards, debit cards are widespread, whether it's a Visa card or a MasterCard, I don't think that should have any adverse impact on them, unless you're going to a jurisdiction where you are a bit wary whether they will accept, a particular card that you are using. But if that's not the case, then I don't think that this particular directive should have a significant adverse impact on individuals or businesses when it comes to travel allowances.
But then if we begin to have huge traffic via online channels for transactions, don't you think it would still affect these businesses and individuals? Because when you look at the level of data or internet penetration and the quality of internet services in Nigeria, to some, it's said to be deplorable and not encouraging enough. So don't you think that will be a challenge for these set of people, most especially businesses and those who make do with having cash as against now having to use online channels?
Yeah, I fully agree. If there are some glitches or significant glitches in terms of the transition from cash payments to electronic transactions, then obviously, at least in the short term, you might have some problems for those who are demanding those allowances in Forex. But by and large, moving to a more electronic means of payment, is a direction that most economies are moving towards. So at some point, an argument can be made whether the transition should have been a little bit more gradual as opposed to immediate. But for me, I think that it is the step in the right direction, because we are facing a currency crisis. The Naira is weakening day by day against hard currencies such as the USD. And it's incumbent on the Central Bank of Nigeria to ensure that there's transparency and there's a tracking of data to help them with their policy formulation and execution. So I think that the step in the right direction. However, should there be such glitches, then I think maybe the transition should be a bit more gradual than immediate.
So then how do you think that these sort of people or, of course, category of those who will be affected by this, how do you think they can be prepared to, of course, acclimatize to this particular change by the Apex Bank?
I think, if I'm in an individual who is going to travel, my first question would be, should my debit card be credited with the amount of travel allowance that I need for me to travel? Will that card be acceptable in the jurisdiction that I'm going to? If it's the US or most of the Western advanced economies, I don't think that should be a problem because most transactions are electronic anyways. But if I'm going to a jurisdiction where I have concerns or I'm worried about, the acceptance of my debit card or credit card in terms of day-to-day transactions, then that becomes a concern, which means that I need to be thinking about having a good mix of some cash versus, what will be credited to my debit card, in the form of travel allowance. So I think that should be the reaction of individuals and businesses, depending on your destination or wherever you're traveling to. How is it going to work out, in terms of the use of those debit cards for electronic payments? And if there are going to be challenges, then you might want to have a mix of cash and, and the debit card when you're traveling. So I think that should be some of the things that individuals and business should be considering when it comes to the issue of travel allowances.
All right, so what are the long-term implications of this decision for the use and probably availability of FX in Nigeria?
I think this is just a slight bit of a number of policies that the Central Bank of Nigeria has been implementing. I don't think this has a significant impact in terms of the supply of Forex. To look at the impact on the economy, you need to look at, what the Central Bank of Nigeria has been doing in terms of the Forex policies, for the past 1 month and more. Remember, they started by ensuring that there's, adequate supply of Forex from key channels such as the commercial banks, where they forced these commercial banks to actually supply the excess Forex that they were keeping to earn returns into the Forex market. So that was one measure that led to a bit of stabilization of the exchange rate, at least in the short term, around 1,400 to a dollar period, until it started depreciating again. So there are a number of measures. This travel allowance issue is just a measure to improve transparency and accountability. But I think the bigger question is whether the shift from, a more fixed exchange rate regime under the previous administration versus the more flexible exchange rate regime that this current administration is implementing, which of these two actually is inuring to our benefit, both in the short term, what we are seeing right now, as well as in the long term. And what you will see if you are focused on, the exchange rate stability, then there's a tendency for you to think that maybe the measures that the Central Bank of Nigeria is implementing right now is actually not working. Because when the current government took over, in June 2023, we all know that the dollar was equivalent to around 450 naira in the official market, and in the power market, around 650. By December, you look at the official rate, you had already notched a dollar to over $1,000. End of January, it was around 1,450. As of Friday, power market is around 1,670, and official rate is around 1,535. So that is the bigger question that is on the minds of people, whether all these number of policies and circulars that are going around to bring efficiency in the Forex market in terms of Forex coming through the official channels and also taking away restrictions in terms of demand for Forex, is it actually achieving the type of exchange rate stability that we're hoping for? And the clear answer in the short term is no. In fact, it's worsened it. So it made people wonder, should we even have some intervention? And we've heard, the opposition leader already making some recommendation in terms of some level of intervention. So those are the bigger questions I think we need to be addressing.
Dr. Josh Bamfo, partner and head of the Transfer Pricing Services Practice, Andersen in Nigeria. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you for having me.